Guys, this is the most important thing to consider if you are trading intraday or you're a day trader in particular. And it's the one thing that's discounted or misunderstood the most. Now, it's going to seem simple, but I'm telling you, most people completely mess this up. And this is probably one of the big things that caused me to waste 2 years of my life hopping from strategy to system to system. And if I could go back, I would love to take it back, but unfortunately, I can't. So hopefully, I can help you do that. And what is this element? Well, it's time. Here's what most people do when they build a strategy, and this is completely backwards. They will go, okay, I'm going to find some technicals. So they'll find some, I'm just going to represent that with technical analysis. So they'll find a little system that, looks really nice, maybe on YouTube, maybe on Google, whatever. They'll find this and they'll be like, oh, cool, this is a cool little system. I'm going to start going and back testing this because that's what I'm supposed to do, right? I'm going to start gathering some data. Maybe they'll forward test it. This is assuming they back test altogether, right? You'll lose people at each stage of this process. But they'll backtest it and they'll be like, okay, cool. Like I can see that it's kind of worked. Like in this period, great. Like let me go and just start applying some real money to it. This is what you do. You have missed the mark massively because a technical system that is just based on technicals is going to be massively flawed. Why? Because it doesn't take into account the environment that each technical system works. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there's only really two categories of systems available to 99% of retail traders. It's going to be a trend following system, which, as you guessed it, works really, really well in a trending environment. I know, shocker. Second of all, we have a consolidating environment, right? Price is going to be doing one of these things. The shapes and the sizes will vary. Overall, these are the two conditions. Now, what works well in each of these environments? Well, trend systems work really well in a trending environment. Mean reversion systems work really well in a consolidation environment. But the problem is, and by the way, the weakness of each one of these systems is the strength of the other and vice versa. So if you go straight to a technical analysis system and it's like, okay, wow, now I'm trading like market structure shifts on the 1 minute time frame. That's great. Like that's fine. But when are you doing it? Like at what are you trying to capture? Because how do you have any idea which one of these environments you're going to get involved in? This is the sign of a beginner in terms of approaching a strategy design because they'll just look at technicals as a be all and end all and they'll be like, okay, well, I'm trending. I'm just going to assume that it's going to continue trending. I'm just going to assume that it's going to continue consolidating. And I'm just going to trade my system and let hope the numbers play out. But in a sense, this is gambling because you're putting in no effort whatsoever to identifying if the environment itself is in the right condition. You'll see me talking a lot on this channel, especially these days, about environment selection. Technicals on their own are very, very little to minimal predictive edge whatsoever. Predicting the environment that you're operating in is incredibly important. And so the question is, how do you do this? And the truth is there's lots of different ways. In this video, I'm going to focus on time of day because I'm going to show you the correct way to build a system that actually incorporates this in a smart way. So let's go through it. Instead of this, this is what I would call the back end of the process. We still need to develop the entire front end because technical analysis is designed as a way to frame risk management consistently. But more importantly, it's there to allow us to exploit a tendency that we found in the market. Now, if we found no tendency, then we're guessing. We're going, oh, I'm drawing my chart pattern on and blah, blah, blah. It's like, boring. Very, very boring. Time is the critical thing. So what does this mean? First, we need to identify a particular time of day that we are interested in. Now, the narrower this is, typically it's going to be the better. So the best people that I know, the best traders I know, tend to have a period of 1 to 2 hours as their trading window. This changes the higher up the time frame you go. So these are typically going to be people who are kind of on the 1 minute to maybe the 15 minute. And then you've got other people who maybe have a slightly larger time window, but they're not at the charts as much, maybe like a 2 to 4 hour window. These are going to be people kind of mainly on the 1 hour to the 4 hour time frame. Of course, these are just general kind of guidelines and principles here. So if we look at this here, right, what does this mean? Well, let's just focus on one here, just because it might be a little bit easier. If we identify a particular time of day, the next thing that we want to do is we want to move to stage 2. This is the observation phase. Yes, I'm going to try and write the whole thing out because I'm an absolute rebel to society, whatever the hell that means. Observation. At this point, it's very critical to differentiate between I'm seeing a fact and I'm seeing a potential, because what we're really trying to achieve here is we're trying to find a potential, in other words, an unproven tendency of that time period. So, for example, we may go down and we may see, okay, look, the New York London crossover, we're both open. I want to understand historically, how does price tend to move? You may break it down into categories and be like, okay, is it either more of a directional move most of the time? Like, how does it change? Like, is there something that happens when we cross over between these two? Whichever one you want to, I like focus on. Maybe you just want to focus on the first hour or two. Maybe you want to just focus on the latest hour or two. That is completely up to you, right? But it doesn't really matter what you pick because you're just trying to find a tendency in whichever time frame you do pick. Once you've identified it, and by the way, instead of backtesting the technical system, backtest this. It's also very quick to look at. Just, gather just like 50, 60, 70, 100 like observations and be like, okay, I can see that this category, if you, like I said, if you created categories, has happened 80% of the time during this period. That's very, very interesting. And that's something to then move forward with because then you're like, okay, I found a potential tendency. Now you need to go to the next step. What's the next step? The next step is you need to validate that tendency using evidence. So this is not back testing ideally. You want to validate it with existing science, not spelt like that or that. Science slash empirical research. What does this mean? Believe it or not, most of the things that you discover in price, you're not going to be the first to discover them. It may feel like it's brand new, and you may feel like you're onto something crazy. But the longer you get into this game, you realize that pretty much everything that you ever come up with has already been discovered in some sense or another by somebody else in the past. This is great because it means you don't need to worry about being some sort of like genius innovator who's going to finally discover the key to the market, which is a delusion that pretty much every single beginner has at some point. I was the same. I thought I was some sort of special whiz kid. Turned out I was just an idiot. Anyway, so we validate with existing science empirical research. What does this mean? We'll search for studies about that specific time period. Remember, we're not looking for the actual strategies now. We're looking for what does the science say about what happens during this trading period? What are the characteristics of that's effect on the market? Has it been studied? And what we're really looking to do is validate if that is a real thing. So if you find this stuff confusing, summarize it with ChatGPT. Okay, find a study online, or you can even ask ChatGPT to compile studies if you want, but it won't be as accurate. Find a study, copy and paste the summary into ChatGPT, be like, summarize this for me in the most simple, plain, easy language possible, and it will do it. So you don't really even need to think. Once you've established that it's real, you know that you have something that works, right? And you've leveraged people that are probably going to be smarter than you and me, and that's great. Once you've observed that this is an actual thing, then we can move on to building a system that capitalizes on that tendency of price. Why? Because if you don't do this beginning thing, you are basically just gambling. You're going, hey, I've got technical rules. I think that the technicals are going to predict price for me, and that's great. But the problem is, you look at any study that tests just pure technical analysis on its own, you'll find that patterns do not consistently outperform the market. Research it yourself. Summarize it with ChatGPT if you can't be bothered to read it. You will find over and over again. And believe it or not, right, those people aren't idiots that are testing it. When I was beginning and I was kind of getting into trading, I used to think, oh, they obviously just don't understand it, or maybe they just weren't good enough. But believe it or not, they weren't idle. The scientific process is incredibly rigorous, right? And they are for the most part, the research is really, really strong in it. And part of the reason that they come to the conclusion that technical analysis doesn't really beat the market by any significant amount is because if you just trade technical analysis in the same way and during all time periods, you're going to run into the issue that market conditions change, the tendencies of each time frame are different, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if you go through this process, you haven't just come up with an observation about the time. You've validated that it is something that is actually based on something reasonable. And also two more things I want to add to here is you don't just want to verify that it exists. So your observation isn't just your observation, someone else has found it. You also want to verify why it happens because it helps you to understand what you're really exploiting. If you find out, okay, look, we're getting tons of new volume coming in as New York session opens, how does that interact with the market dynamics? Is there something within there that I can begin to find a potential edge with? And if you find it, then you can move on to technical analysis, building a system around that. Because you might find that, for example, one time period you pick is mainly consolidatory, like 80% of the time. Then it's just about, okay, how can I build a technical system that operates well with this? Because you factored in elements like win rate and all these sorts of things before you even started on the technical system. Yes, the technical system can be refined and improved and all that sort of stuff. But if you don't have the other element, you're kind of just gambling, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not really a gambling guy. So I'm don't really find it that interesting. I mean, I don't mind going to the casino every now and again. It's quite fun. Not that you needed to know that. But anyway, yeah. So food for thought, guys. Time is the critical element. So whatever time of day you pick, it's up to you. But this is something that I wish I'd known earlier because it helps a ton. This is just one element of environment selection. We also have other elements as well that are constantly interplaying as well. Things like news, overreactions to news, underreactions to news, how that normally plays out. Tons of stuff. The bigger macroeconomic picture, if you want to get dive into that sort of stuff, that also helps. But again, it depends on the type of trader you want to be. Macro stuff isn't going to help at all if you're on the 1 minute to 15 minute. You're going to be pretty much exclusively looking at short-term news events, massive overreactions, underreactions, and time. That's going to be pretty much your toolkit for most day traders. But yeah, so I hope you found this helpful. If you'd like more one-on-one help, let me know. And yeah, check out the links in the description. If not, that's also fine. Do your own research, find what works for you, and let me know how you get on. None of this is financial advice, as always, guys. Take care. See you soon.